just to give a little context of what we're talking about, online learning is obviously a huge field, and I tend to think of it in three distinct categories of formal online programs where, it really resembles, university or college. You probably pay, you get some sort of accredited degree. On the other side of the spectrum, there's informal learning. The things that we do on YouTube and Wikipedia and all over the internet often constitute small, learning experiences. But the middle of this ground, the non-formal learning, is something that has really grown in the last 5 or 6 years, and this includes everything from individual lessons or exercises to a lot of the online courses and Moocs, or massive open online courses that a lot of you may have heard of, that come from universities and organizations around the world. And that's really the work that we are focused on. We're as an organization, we're interested in developing ways that these online courses might be better utilized by communities and organizations that aren't currently benefiting from online learning. So I'm sure a lot of you have heard or taken an online course before, and one thing that is that the providers of these courses come in all stripes and sizes. There are nonprofit organizations like edX that work with universities around the world to turn university-level courses into online classes. Khan Academy, takes a different approach. Their materials are more like a personalized bank of resources that individuals can go through at their own pace. And then there are for-profit companies as well that don't necessarily have affiliations with universities, but have started developing materials on their own. And this is, a lot has happened in the U.S., but there's a lot of organizations globally that are involved in this as well. I think one thing that a lot of these institutions have in common is that they have really big promises. Take the best courses in the world, learn anytime, anywhere. You can learn anything. These are really, really big statements. And this idea that anybody can learn anything, anywhere for free is something that we find a little problematic. And so I would invite you to maybe use the chat and be curious what you think might be wrong with this sentence. How would you disclaim this sentence? Maybe it's an issue of access to a computer. Maybe it's not just anywhere. So we're seeing some comments in. So I would encourage you just to take a few chats, and I'll edit this statement to see if we can come up with something better. So ignoring the digital divide, right? So anybody with sufficient digital literacy. So thanks for that input, Camille. Anything else?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, you're good.
So I'm going to think that it's it's not exactly free, right? It's for some cost, because even if an online course is free, there's going to be some sort of resources and time costs that are associated with taking the online course. Anything, I think, is probably a troubling word as well, right? Because a lot of the online courses that are out there, focus, their English language. They focus a bit on, university level subjects. So it's really learning things that online course providers think are important. And so if you sort of go down this path, and you see that a sentence like this actually isn't exactly true. And just one example, worked with a group a few months ago, and after we were done editing this, we came up with the idea that anybody who has a friend or has sufficient digital and linguistic literacy and other literacies with a good amount of motivation, who also knows where to look online, can learn a lot of mostly Western-oriented things that already exist anywhere where there's internet connectivity for some sort of cost. But the people aren't actually knowing if they've learned anything, if they're not part of our community, and what's the point of doing this if it's not tied to some sort of accreditation or job prospect or next step. So that's the work that we're really doing with this project with Learning Circles, is trying to bridge that gap between these very sort of alphabet soup type sentences and this more elegant utopian idea that anybody can learn anything for free. And so the organization that I'm with, Peer-to-Peer University, we're a nonprofit. We are a distributed community of volunteers, staff members, and partners working around the world, and we've been working for 6 or 7 years now in open education. Our goal, our mission is to provide communities with online learning experiences, regardless of the background, their digital backgrounds, and we do this by working with online courses, community centers, and open source tools to create face-to-face learning circles. So this work started 2 years ago with Chicago Public Library, started with a problem that I imagine many of you are facing, that is for many individuals, online learning can be lonely, difficult, and really overwhelming. There's this issue that's come up already today, the digital divide, a lot of folks not feeling comfortable going through an online course on their own. Before that, a lot of folks might not even be aware that these courses exist. And furthermore, there's just not a lack of support. I can say that I've started many online courses and I've finished very few because there aren't the sort of social touch points that I need to get through materials. And so the idea of learning circles came when we thought to address each of these points by involving a facilitator who has digital skills and can work with a group of folks to work through an online course, using public libraries as promotional vehicles to get folks engaged who aren't already taking online courses, and to try to facilitate peer learning groups to address this issue that there's a lack of support. When we talk about a facilitator, a lot of the times we're working directly with librarians. These are folks who are not supposed to be a content expert. So if the Learning Circle finds a Udacity course in HTML and CSS, or a Coursera course in public speaking, or a Saylor course in resume writing and interview skills, the librarian is not expected to be an expert in that subject. What they are expected is to be comfortable with the online course platform, invested in the group that they're working with, and available on a weekly basis to work with this group of people who returns to the library for 2 hours a week for 6 to 8 weeks to work through this online course together. I can say that being a facilitator for a learning circle ends up taking about 4 hours a week for 6 to 8 weeks, and I think the introduction that I'm giving today is and oftentimes enough to get started with a learning circle. And we also run professional development workshops and work with libraries and other communities to support their efforts as they want to try to start learning circles in their community. It's probably obvious to each of you why we want to work with libraries. They're remarkably accessible spaces. They have consistent internet and power. They align with our mission of open access, the idea that everybody should have the ability to engage in learning. They have very strong links to diverse audiences, which I think is one of the biggest issues that face online courses. And they have highly skilled employees who work towards the dissemination of knowledge. And I think as we've continued our work outside of Chicago, there has just been a lot of great relationships that have developed with librarians who view learning circles as an incredible outlet to further the mission of the library with regards to online learning. And then peer learning, which is the third element of the learning circles, is something that might be a little less familiar. But the main tenets of peer learning is that everybody has expertise, that sharing and connecting with one another is often the best ways to learn, that we require feedback in order to improve, and that the technology is not neutral, and that when we're working through an online course, there are going to be biases and stereotypes embedded in those courses. And as a community, we can challenge those stereotypes and make sure that the work that we're doing and the course that we're working through is working for us, rather than us feeling like that we're somehow beholden to a particular course. And those three principles of a facilitator, a library, and a peer learning constitute a learning circle. And so, simply put, it's a facilitated study group for learners that want to take an online course together at the library. It's a combination of the online course, the library, and then the Learning Circle Toolkit, which are the resources that we've been developing now for 2 years. The main element of the Learning Circle Toolkit is a handbook, which is available on our website for free. It's CC licensed, and it's available for a PDF download. It's also there's also a web version, and this provides detail on, more in-depth detail, I should say, on a lot of the topics that we'll just, briefly go through today. So, background information on the history of online learning and why we think this is a compelling project, tips on how you can select an online course that resonates with your community, checklists for the how to set up the space and the supplies you might need, instructions on how to use our free software tools, promotional templates, flyers, tweets, Facebook posts, templates that you can use to get the word out, tips on facilitating, recipe cards, which are 6 one-page documents we put together that give structure to the learning circle each week. Starting each week with the same check-in activity, ending with an opportunity to give a little reflection and feedback, and then each learning circle each week has a different activity that's designed to either support collaboration across participants, increase a sense of relevance between the individual's lives and the course that they're taking, and then in a short appendix where we have an application and a certificate to accompany the online course. But just to be clear, a lot of the online courses that we're working with are not courses that P2PU made. We're really drawing on the best of what's out there already online. In some cases, P2PU does create some courses, and we are working with some partners to develop materials for learning circles. But this is really more of a model to apply to the world of online learning. And so if you check out our website, you can see a list of where learning circles are happening around the world right now. And as I said, a lot of these are at libraries, but because our tools are openly available, we're seeing folks around the world who want to activate the community that they're part of as a learning hub and bring folks together to take a free online course together. And so there'll be a link at the end of this presentation. But just going to our website gives you, goes through all the steps you'll need if you wanted to start a learning circle at your library. The weekly tempo, as I said, the learning circles, they meet for about 2 hours a week for 6, 7, or 8 weeks, depending on the length of the online course. And as a facilitator, beforehand, we will, automatically generate a reminder message that gets sent by email or by text to everybody who signed up for the learning circle. And so you'll have an opportunity to edit that reminder if you want to give any specific feedback to the participants. Do a brief review of the materials for the upcoming week. Again, not to become an expert in the subject matter, but just to make sure you're staying a little bit ahead of the game, and taking a little time just to get the space set up. Sometimes folks bring their own computers. Sometimes they rely on the library to include have computers on hand in a short application that people fill out to take a learning circle. One of the questions we ask is whether or not they can bring their own materials. Then afterwards, we just ask that you share a little feedback with us, and there's you'll be prompted each week after your learning circle just to log in and share a little feedback, so we can know how it's going and if there are any ways we can help. And those are really just meant to be 15 or 20-minute bookends to what is meant to be an hour and a half or 2-hour session to work through the online course with a group of participants. And I talked a little bit about the recipe cards earlier, and just to go into a little more detail about them, we designed activities each week that are really meant to work alongside the online course. They're not related necessarily to the content, but as a group is working through a course in web literacy, we want to make sure that alongside learning the tools, they are setting goals about what they want to get out of this course, that they're able to give good feedback and critique to their peers, that they're drawing connections between the course and the things that they're actually trying to achieve in their life, that we're recognizing that the path to success is not linear, and that oftentimes making mistakes or getting things wrong is a good way to learn. And then finally, that we're taking the time to reflect and make sure that the experience that we had is what we wanted it to be, and identifying where we go from here. And oftentimes we find that groups of learners will stay in touch after the learning circle and continue to support each other, either taking another online course or helping to apply for a job, or or what have you. So just to give a little bit of information about how the work has gone so far, the pilot that we ran across 20, or I guess closer to 15 at first, but now 20 branches of Chicago Public Library. We worked with a total of probably about 150 learners. 65% of them were first-time online learners, so they were coming, they were hearing about these through flyers and community emails at CPL. And we saw retention rates over 6 to 8 weeks around 50%. And the same online courses overall have retention rates around 5 or 10%. So bringing folks together, it's not necessarily causal, but there's certainly a correlation here that folks who are committed to showing up week after week, are going, and in this learning circle model, are going to stand a higher likelihood of finishing the course. I think this is exceptionally good considering that so many people are first-time online learners. A lot of folks are doing work outside of the learning circle, and for people who have a computer at home, that might mean that they're logging into the course platform and doing some work during the week. But a lot of people were also using the library outside of the learning circle as a place to to do a little bit more work. We've seen a lot of folks coming back and taking another learning circle, and even some people who attend a learning circle who then ultimately want to facilitate. That's something that is happening right now in Detroit Public Library. There are 2 women who took a user innovation learning circle, and they're now going to be facilitating that same course in the spring, which is a great way to grow the program without adding strain to the limited resources of the library. I think some of the reflections that we found and that we're looking to see is that folks aren't just learning content of the course, but they're also increasing digital skills and academic mindsets alongside this. There's an opportunity really to question the role of expertise. And I think one activity that we like to do in the beginning of each learning circle is really talk about what it means to be in the circle, because so many people come into a room to learn and they sit down facing whatever they think the front of the room is going to be. And we have an opportunity to talk about what expertise means when there is no front of the room, when us as a group in a circle are all sort of the front of the room, and talking about the expertise that each of us as individuals have, the expertise that resides in the online course, in our peers, in the library, and in the community at large. It's hard sometimes because it's very different, and I think it does take a week or two to really get into the swing of things, where folks are not viewing you or the facilitator as a teacher, but as someone who's really there just to nudge the experience along. And I think directly related to this is seeing the ability of a community to overcome a bad course. There's one example of a group of 4 or 5 adults who were doing an interview skills course. And after 2 or 3 weeks, they said, this is just not great. These questions aren't relevant to us. But instead of stopping to attend, they decided that they would start writing better questions and really just using the time to practice interviewing with each other. And I think that's, the goal is not to find bad courses that people can overcome, but I think it's really compelling to see that when a group stumbles through materials, their instincts are not just to quit, but to recognize that maybe that course just isn't for them. But that doesn't change the fact that they have a need, and there's a group of people in their community that have a shared need, and that perhaps they can still help each other. We'll find ourselves in learning circles supporting a very diverse group of learners. I can think of one learning circle where you have a college student who's a non-native English speaker who's attending a academic writing learning circle to complement some work he's doing in university. 2 folks who are mid-career, underemployed, looking for a new job, and viewing academic writing as an opportunity to maybe get a promotion or build up a new skill that will allow them to find a new job. And then 1 or 2 folks in retirement who are always attending the library's programs and think this is just a nice way to essentially a hobby to do in retirement. And bringing those 5 very different people together to work together towards a common goal, I think is a really compelling and evocative example of working together towards common goals when you might not have similar backgrounds. And then finally, we see that learning circles are successful when they're aligned with the mission of the library. And so in Chicago Public Library, this really meant focusing on adult basic skills. In Kansas City, it means that we're focusing on digital inclusion and building up basic digital and web literacy, and really using learning circles as an outlet to support the mission and the scope of what the library is already doing. A few tips that I think that this will sort of end this section, and then I'll give a few case studies and we can have more of a discussion. But a few facilitation techniques that I'll draw out from the facilitator handbook is that taking that half an hour to prepare beforehand and reflect afterwards does really seem to increase the experience, not just the quality of the experience, not just for the learners, but for the facilitator in general. We have a Google group community of facilitators who are posting questions to each other, sharing their reflections, and I think being able to document the change and the improvement over the course of 6 weeks is something that tends to lead facilitators to want to try participate and facilitate another learning circle again. As I mentioned earlier, calling out expertise where you see it and recognizing that the expertise is not always going to be in the talking head on the online course, but sometimes it's going to be with the peer who's sitting next to you. Sometimes it might be the librarian. Sometimes it's going to be maybe going out into the stacks and finding a book or searching on Google. But really recognizing that expertise can come from anywhere, and that we want to try to break away from the very sort of transactional model of lecture as a way of learning. And similarly to that, always putting the patrons in front of the courses, and that if a group is having trouble or if an individual is having trouble with the course, recognizing that and trying to suggest that this is not necessarily a problem with the person, but in all likelihood it's a problem with the course, and that while online courses are a great jumping off point for a learning circle, not everything is necessarily going to be in that online course, and that sometimes it's going to be a discussion with peers. Sometimes it's going to be finding some other resources online that are going to help a particular patron succeed. And then finally, just appreciating that this is different. I think this combining libraries with online courses is a sort of intuitive project, given the prices of universities and the very sort of inequitable distribution of online learning resources. However, it takes a little getting used to, and I think having the patience to recognize that it might not be for everybody. That really it tends to be the end of the second week that the group really starts to gel and figure out that they do have a lot of ownership in dictating how this looks and feels. I think having that sort of patience is very useful. A few quotes from the work in Chicago and some photos asking patrons what they liked the most about the learning circles. We have here that the facilitators continually made me feel comfortable, which I really appreciated this. The informal atmosphere was great. The best thing about my learning circle was knowing that I was not the only one out there with the dream of writing and being able to share this with my fellow learning circle members. I appreciate Chicago Public Library's commitment to learning and expanding the tools of the library. I feel very lucky to have taken this class. And so after we finished the work in Chicago, as I said, we released this open source learning circle toolkit that I'll point each of you to at the end. And over the course of 2016, this work really expanded. The pink dots are places now, library systems, where we have formal partnerships and are working directly with librarians and their patrons to build learning circle programs across their systems. The green dots are library systems in North Carolina, in Charlotte and Detroit and Kansas City and Milledgeville, Georgia, where we've run a 3 or 4 hour workshop with librarians and have now seen librarians picking this up on their own. And then the yellow dots are cities or individuals who have found our resources and our materials and just started a learning circle on their own. And that's one of the benefits of being an open community and really supporting people using and remixing our materials, is that folks who we didn't know beforehand are getting in touch and letting us know that they've been running learning circles. I'll just give a few. We talked a bit about Chicago, but just a few updates on some of the case studies that we're doing now. We're working with librarians in Nairobi and Nakuru in Kenya to identify online courses that resonate with students and young adults primarily in each of these cities. Nakuru is, I think, the third or fourth, I think the fourth largest city in Kenya. And we just had a group of 30 Kenyans, most of whom had never taken an online course before, work through an HTML and CSS course. I think 26 of them finished the online course after 10 sessions, and they are now going to be partnering with small businesses in Nakuru so that the graduates of this learning circle can try to help build websites for local businesses. So a clear example there of trying to tie the learning circle directly into opportunities in the community. We're doing some work in the Northeast, in Boston, Portland, Maine, Providence, Rhode Island, to work with English language centers and adult literacy sites, some of which are at public libraries, other of which are at high schools or YMCAs. And this is to deal with the very, very long waiting lists that a lot of adult literacy centers find. Some folks are waiting 6 months just to take a literacy course. And so we are identifying English language courses and in some cases using the ESL teachers, but oftentimes finding AmeriCorps volunteers or other individuals who can facilitate so that people who are on the waiting list can start learning right away and also get to know some of the peers who ultimately they will be enrolled in a formal English class with. In Kansas City, this was a few months ago, we are using materials from GCF Learn Free, which have a scope of online learning materials, but we are using some of their digital literacy materials to pull together a course that we were calling Make the Internet Work for You. And this was really thinking about basic digital literacy and web literacy skills like email, Google Maps, social media, privacy, and trying to take the materials that GCF Learn Free had created and turn those into interesting group activities and discussions that would benefit the learning circle model. So for instance, in a week on social media, everybody identified their favorite celebrity and then tried to help each other stalk that person online and figure out how is this person portraying themselves online, and what social media platforms could they use to stay up to date with that person. For the Google Maps, the Maps week, everybody gave an update on where they go during the week, where they have come across bad traffic, and then tried to help each other use maps to find alternate or better routes. And we'll be continuing this work and growing the work in Kansas City early this year. In France, we are working with the public library system in Paris and a group of master's students who you see here. Each of these master's students is identifying a community and an online course that they want to work with, and then trying to grow learning circles in that community over the course of the academic year. So I'm working with each of them to do facilitation training, and they'll be then going into the libraries and facilitating learning circles on their own. And then finally, a little bit differently, we are working with the Children's Museum in Pittsburgh. They finished an IMLS grant. I think they wrapped it up they're wrapping it up now, on building makerspaces, and they asked us if we could help them distill their research into an online course that then they could publish as learning circle materials. And so we worked with them, we're still working with them actually, to turn their research into a 5 or 6 module online course, and then we'll reach out to other libraries and museums who might be building makerspaces in the future and letting them know that these materials are available. And in this case, librarians, museums will be going through the materials as a form of professional development. That's, I think, what I want to say for right now. You can see here that if you want to facilitate a learning circle at your library, you can just go to peertopeeruniversity.org, our website, P2PU, or p2pu.org/facilitate, and that will take you right there. And from there, our tools will help you find an online course, get you set up with an account, so then you can, really all you have to do is fill out 6 or 7 fields. It's striking me now that I am on a screen share, so I should just show this to you. So if I go to, excuse me, if I go to p2pu.org /facilitate, you can see here, sort of going through the steps, creating an account, downloading the facilitator guide, and then joining our community. So if I sign up, I'll just log in. You can see this is my facilitator dashboard. So you'd have to log in for the first time. When I want to create a learning circle, all I have to do is select one of the online courses that we've already identified, and then you can add a course if you want to do a different one. Write the address of where you're coming, what city it's happening, when it's happening. And once you just fill out those fields, we will create the learning circle, and then you will have, your individual learning circle will show up on this page, and you'll receive an email with a link so that you can then, if this was your learning circle, Childhood in the Digital Age, you could then just share this link directly with patrons in your library or on social media, and then they would just have to fill out the short form, and then you as a facilitator will see when people are signing up, and you'll be able to communicate with each of them in the way that they see fit. The other thing that you can do if you're interested is join the community that we have here of facilitators and librarians who are working with us. We are always interested in expanding to new communities, having the opportunity not just to implement our work, but be getting feedback and letting us know how you might want to improve the toolkit, and helping us publicize this so new communities can hear about this. I'm seeing a comment on the side about learning a bit more about the Makerspace learning material. Yeah, I can say about that this is an IMLS grant, and the idea with this was that folks all over the country are creating makerspaces, but there's a lot of intentionality that needs to be thought through, so that you don't end up with basically just a 3D printer in a closet, which I think is the evocative example they gave of making makerspaces gone bad. And so they've developed a number of activities that sort of go through the values of the institution and help project those values and think about how they manifest themselves in a makerspace. They have some really nice spectra that you as a group can go through to think about where you sit on the side of from free play to strict project-based work, or digital to analog. So I think they have about 20 of these spectra that you as a group can go through. And so we are helping take these resources and turn them into prompts for groups to work through, so that if they're in the process of developing a makerspace, they can meet for an hour and a half a week, maybe over lunch, and use this course as a guide towards creating their own makerspace. And so that's what I prepared here. And I really want to thank Al for inviting me, and I'm very grateful for each of you for attending, and also that this will be broadcast afterwards so that we can share that as an introduction to learning circles for anyone else who's interested. I want to take some time either by chat or just by calling out to talk through anything else that people feel like they have questions about, or Al, feel free to jump in yourself.
Yeah, so as we're waiting to see if other participants maybe have some questions, just a few things had come to mind. One thing is with regards to permissions for offering MOOCs. Is there any process you need to go to ask the MOOC originator, to have permission to use it in the library? I would guess for the most part, since it's not like you're charging, for people to attend, typically in the public library anyway. So, but have you run into any issues with that to kind of get a heads up from the creator?
Yeah, I would say we have not run into those issues. One of the letters in the acronym Mooc is open, and regrettably a lot of MOOCs are not open. they may be free to use, but they are not licensed in a way that you can remix, reuse. But even in the case where they're just free, it's not a violation of terms by any means for a library to bring together a group of people to log in and work through these courses together. We have reached out to course providers more just so that they know, because it's I think it's a good opportunity, and in some cases they've been really interested to hear how it goes. And I think what we'd like to see is creating more resources that would directly benefit communities that have that don't have undergraduate degrees, and maybe reimagining the dynamic between the expert and the learners, so that learners feel like baked into the course material they have a little bit more ownership. The one place that permission does come in, some libraries have asked us about using lynda.com or Gale or libraries of information and courses that they already use. And I can think about a few examples where we feel that if a library is already paying for access, there's no reason that those materials shouldn't be used as a learning circle. The only thing that you need to be aware about there is how many simultaneous users your license supports. And so long as everybody is logging in on their own computer, and if you have 15 or 20 licenses, there's less than 15 or 20 people, then that's not going to be a violation of those terms either. Technically, I think you might run into some weird gray areas if you have 15 people meeting, projecting a course up on a projector, a course that you have to pay for at the library. And so you have 15 people who are technically just using one license. That might be a problem. And then obviously, if you started charging people to show up for a learning circle, then that would be an issue. But as far as I understand, that's not really on the cards or on the table right now.
Okay, another question that comes to mind with regards to maybe if you had some tips on actually recruiting volunteers and or partnering with agencies to offer these MOOCs?
Sure. Partnering in terms of bringing in new patrons to the library or finding people to facilitate?
With regards to facilitating, yeah, facilitators.
Yeah, so a few things that have come to mind. I would say, first of all, that if this is something anyone's interested, I would really encourage you to reach out to me. My email address is on the bottom of the slide that you should still be seeing, because while we do not have great geographic reach as a group of individuals, we'd really like to help you make this experience useful for you. And so I can say a few things that have worked in the past are, local colleges or schools of education are generally very receptive to the ideas of learning circles, both as a way for students to get practice facilitating and working outside of their ivory tower, but also as a means of, it can also be viewed as a form of service work or volunteer work to get a student who's maybe interested in the subject out into public library to work with a group of patrons there. So I think that tends to be our first stop. As I mentioned, in the Northeast, we've had some luck working with AmeriCorps volunteers. Al, you and I were talking before this call started about literacy sites and partnering with organizations that are already trying to do this work. I think digital inclusion organizations is a sort of growing field of nonprofits and organizations around the country that in a lot of cases already have technology and have a great deal of digital capacity. And sometimes they're just, the thing that they lack is a community of people, and that's something that a library does very, very well. And so I think when I think about starting a Learning Circle program, when I go back to that slide from the beginning about the role of libraries, libraries have a lot of pieces of the puzzle already taken care of, that they have the space, the consistent power and internet, a mission that's really aligned with this work, and a very competent set of employees who work with very diverse audiences. If you feel like the one thing that's missing is you're a small library and you don't have the staff time to devote to this program, I think articulating to local organizations, whether they are nonprofits or colleges, that you have the computers, you have the you can promote this across all of your your listservs and your community boards, and that what you're really just looking for is someone who's willing to spend a few hours a week working with a group of patrons. I think that's something that a lot of groups would be really responsive to.
No, I don't want to do that.
Another question I had is with regards to length of course. Do you have any suggestions as far as, because I know some of these MOOCs, they go out to maybe like 12 weeks. Is there kind of like a sweet spot as far as, a duration for a course?
Yeah, I mentioned 6 to 8 weeks as a length of a learning circle because I think we find that if it's less than that, you're not going to necessarily guarantee that people are going to have time to really get into the rhythm and accomplish a whole lot, but oftentimes folks are not immediately willing to commit to something that's more than 8 weeks long if they haven't tried it already. And so this is where there's sometimes a little bit of a mismatch between the learning circle and the online course. I can say that there's a course from Coursera in public speaking that I think they just redid this and made it shorter, but for a long time it was a 10-week course, and we would always do that as a 6-week learning circle. And the point that we made up front was, we're going to work through the first 6 weeks of this course, and then at the end, if you're really interested, first of all, we could just continue meeting as a group informally, or after 6 weeks of using the Coursera platform, of practicing public speaking, you as individuals will be in a much better place to just finish this course on your own. So sometimes if we see that there's subject matter that we really like, but it's a semester long or a 12-week course, like you say, Al, we'll just take a look at the course and think about, is there a good stopping point that's maybe halfway through, and we can sort of start this as a learning circle, and then 6 weeks from now, that the activity card, the recipe card in the last week talks about next steps, and are people happy with where they are? Do they want to keep going? There's an opportunity to think about what's next, and the benefit of working in libraries with online courses is that neither of these things are shutting down the next week, and if somebody really wants to continue with the course, there's nothing to stop them from continuing to show up either with their peers or on their own.
Okay, these questions are really rolling here. So one other question I had with regards to those registering for the MOOC. So is the intent that everyone attending would register individually, or is it kind of, it's left up to the individual, and then typically do the facilitators just maybe kind of make people aware that, if they're looking for a certificate, they can pay for that, if there's something they're interested in doing. And I don't know if that's anything the MOOC providers, something that, they kind of appreciate would be shared with the group, or.
Yeah, these are great questions. So on the point of registration, yes, we have, as a sort of an addendum to the facilitator handbook, we have screenshotted PDFs of 8 or 9 different providers of how to log in for an account. So in case the facilitator or individuals are having trouble, a big part of that first week is getting folks signed up, which is not necessarily the most exciting thing to do. But the reason I think that's important is it's a way to track individual progress. It also ensures that folks are not just receiving the content passively, but they are engaged in digital literacy work, and that they are, even if they're working on public speaking, they are going to be improving their ability to use a computer for learning, and are familiarizing themselves with an online course platform that in many cases will have tons of other courses that this individual is now, at least from a digital literacy perspective, prepared to enroll in. I would say, though, that it doesn't always end up being the case that everybody's working on their own computer. Interview skills, public speaking, storytelling, these are subjects that sometimes lend themselves much more to group discussion. And so I can think of a few instances where, at the end of the first week where we have a few questions to address. One of them is, do we all want to be going at our own rate? Do we want to be going together? Do we want to be on our own computers? Do we want to, get one computer and put it up on a projector screen? And I can say there's definitely been a few learning circles that have decided they'd rather just get one computer, put it on a projector screen, watch the videos together, read the materials together, and really sort of walk through the curriculum together. We, in response to that, sort of build that in as one of the questions in that first week as the community is starting to develop, its own sort of modality of work, what the way that group wants to work together is. For certification, so that ties directly into registration, that if you don't register for an online course, you won't have any proven completion for that course. So in the final week, we talk about certification, talk about success, and try to tie that directly into the conversation about goals and if and why getting a certificate from the online course provider is aligned with the goals of the individual. And in some instances, it will make sense for someone to try to finish the course for a certificate, or even, in some instances, pay for a certificate. We also, as part of the Learning Circle handbook, have a template certificate for learning circle completion, and that tends to go to folks who attend at least 80% of the learning circles and or get through the online course. And that's the conversation around that in talking with learners is that receiving some sort of acknowledgement of completion in a fairly in a quasi-formal academic setting can be a big deal, and it's something that we want to celebrate and support. But by no means do we try to talk about the certificate as the end-all and be-all. The sort of recognition that you're getting is only valuable if it's in service of you achieving your personal goals. And sometimes certification is a step in that direction, but other times it's not the important piece.
Okay, great. And one last question for me, and I believe this is mentioned somewhere in the Facilitator Handbook, but what you would recommend for sites that aggregate MOOCs that are available? Could maybe just show us one that be helpful for those looking for MOOCs.
Yeah. So here I'm on Class Central, which is a website that we link directly to in the Facilitator Handbook, and this is a site that aggregates online courses from all different places. And so if I'm browsing my subjects, I can see here hundreds of courses in a variety of different subjects. And Al, what's a subject that stands out to you, something you might want to see in your library?
Oh, me personally, I've in the past, maybe something on jazz history, that's a personal interest. I think maybe people in the community would be interested.
Cool. I think it's telling me I now have to sign up. Let's see. Okay. So if I type in jazz, so I'm seeing, a Coursera course on jazz improvisation, an edX course on jazz appreciation, another edX course on the music, the stories, and the players. Long list of courses. And so if I click on this Coursera course, oops, that's the wrong link. If I click on the jazz improvisation, I'll learn a little bit more. It's not the best interface. I then have to click Go to Class, and that's when I show up at the Coursera page. I can see that this course is about learning the basic concepts of improvisation from a jazz pianist. I can see that it's 6 weeks with 3 to 6 hours a week, so that's going to work very well as a learning circle. It seems to be a well-reviewed course. I can view the syllabus, see that I'm going to get an intro, talk about improvisation, vocabulary around improvisation, making choices, harmony, theme, and variation. See that the class started on January 9th, and again, this is where the learning circle and the online course might not be aligned. A lot of online courses are on demand, meaning that you can access them at any time. Other courses come and go, and so this is a course that recently started. I can log in using my Coursera account, and then if I do a little bit more work looking through this course, what I would then do is say, this sounds awesome, so let's take this link for jazz improvisation. I'm going to go back to the Learning Circle website. I'm going to log in. I'm going to create a learning circle. I'm going to add this course, and then I'm going to do jazz improvisation. Put a link into the website. It comes from Coursera. Let's pull their short their short little about here. Learn them. Throw that down there in the caption. Course start date. Again, this is for the course itself, if the course starting in the future, but it already started, so we're just going to put in today's date. 6 weeks, 3 hours, 3 to 6 hours a week, so we'll put 4. No prerequisites. I'm going to add that, and now I'm going to be able to create a learning circle using this course, which is, exactly what we want to do. So I can see jazz improvisation. We're going to meet at Al's house in the kitchen. Sorry, Al, but we're all going to be coming over.
Pretty smart.
We can say 123 Main Street in Albany, and the date of our first learning circle is going to be 2 weeks from now. It's going to meet for 6 weeks at 4 o'clock for an hour and a half. Want to link to P2PU, and then I create the learning circle, and that's it. And so now I've just created this page that I can share with folks around my neighborhood saying, hey, I'm hosting this course. If you go to our Learning Circle website, you'll see that it's now going to show up as a course that's starting in 2 weeks at Al's house. I will delete this Al so nobody, I guess you probably don't live at 123 Main Street, so you don't have to worry. And that's really what's involved with creating a learning circle. I will say one other thing that I thought was really fun. In Detroit, rather, a librarian. I'm getting an error message from the audio. Can you still hear me, Al?
Yeah, you're still coming through on my end.
Okay, great. A librarian in Detroit recently printed out a list of all the courses that we've used. On our website, we do have a list of about 30 online courses that we've used in the past that we think work well as learning circles. She printed this whole thing out and put it on her website, or put it by circulation, and she put big stickers there. I'm going to show you a photo. So over the course of a month, people who came by could look at the courses that they're offering and put a red sticker next to that course. And after a month, you could see who was interested. And this was great because it was publicity for learning circles. It was an opportunity to gain a sense of who's interested in what from the community. And then I think the 2 or 3 courses that had the most red dots are now the learning circles that Detroit Public Library is going to be running in just a month or 2. So I thought that was a really, really nice way of surfacing interest from the community and then using that to just determine what learning circles we're going to be running.
And it looks like, as we're running just about the top of the hour, but we had one last question from Jen, and she mentioned she noticed there was a cost for the course you had pulled up. Would we need to pay for each participant in this example? Yeah, go ahead, Griff.
Yeah, just going to say no. If you see here, I mean, I think, can I take this course for free? Yes, you can access all lectures and materials and some assignments for free. Coursera particularly, I think, always tries to direct you towards the version of the course where you have to pay, but almost everything is still available for free if you, what they call, audit the course. So, I can say we have never ended up using a course that the library has to pay for, aside from, like I mentioned, if a library already has an account with lynda.com or Gale. Using learning circles as a way to leverage some of those materials. But if you found a course that you thought was great and did have a fee associated with it, and you wanted to do that, then yeah, by all means, sure. But again, we've never found ourselves in a position where we couldn't find a free alternative. And that's really, I think, as I think about the future, I do imagine a world where open educational resources improve to the point where rather than paying for content, we're trying to get our content for free, and what we're paying for is disseminating that content to wider audiences, and that's exactly what we're trying to do with learning circles. Is focus less on paying for licensing fees and more on bringing facilitators on board, having professional development workshops like this that can think about using all the great materials that are out there, and making sure that we're putting those to use in a way that is equitable for a wide range of our fellow community members.
Okay, so we've just hit the top of the hour, so I think we're all set with regards to questions. So Griff, I thank you so much for presenting this. It was a wealth of information, and I'm hopefully everyone online has gotten a lot of good ideas to be able to pursue this. As I mentioned earlier, this webinar is being recorded, so I will provide the link to the recording to everyone that's registered, as well as I'll provide a link to the slides as well. So without any further ado, I guess we'll go ahead and end the presentation today. And again, thank you so much, Griff, for presenting this afternoon.
Thank you very much, Al, and I encourage anyone who's interested in this to to get started or to reach out to us if you're interested in soliciting some of our support. But really grateful to have the opportunity today. Thanks again, Al, for putting this together.
Okay, thank you.